at ya, back at ya. Tell you what's master, coming at ya, coming at ya. Rhyme style disaster, coming at ya, back at ya. Tell you what's master.
All right, I'm Wilfred Reilly, and we are glad to welcome you to another episode of Cut the Bull, one of the most scintillating, highest-rated podcasts in the United States, at least in my own unsourced opinion. And today we are, I forgot to introduce my lovely and talented co-host Brooks Crenshaw is with us from an undisclosed location, as well as Arizona political commentator and lawyer Christy Kelly. And today we are talking to, is it Alina Clough?
It was Alina Clough, now it's Allie Voss.
Alina Voss, okay, yeah. Alina Voss, who is a conservative environmentalist, an endangered creature in its own right, about what we can do to make the world a better place. So kind of a change from the Southern politicians and WSJ commentators and so on. So, Alina, do you prefer Alina?
Either one.
All right. You mean like Allie or Clough?
Allie or Alina.
Oh, okay, Alex. All right, I like Alina, but so the usual opening softball question from me, what is conservative environmentalism? I looked into your background. You have about 20,000 followers online. This seems to be a fairly popular idea, but how can environmentalism be political in any way? And what is your version of it mean?
I'd like to think that it doesn't have to be political in any way. I think in an ideal world, maybe it wouldn't be. But the fact of the matter is, I think that environmentalism is primarily understanding the project of caring for the environment and nature in general. How we do that and the solutions that kind of attach to that problem statement do vary politically for a lot of different people and certainly ideologically. So I think conservative environmentalism is kind of conservatives' history of it, which tends to, I would believe, be a little bit more nuanced and a lot more durable than a lot of the solutions coming out of the left, at least in my opinion. For us, that means kind of caring for the planet because of humans, not in spite of humans. I think that if I had to paint with a pretty broad brush here, a lot of left-leaning environmentalism kind of treats humans as though they're the sort of cancer on the earth, whereas the view from conservative environmentalists is much more, I want to preserve this and I want to conserve this for future generations, rather than kind of out of a sense of shame or a sense that the earth's natural state is without people on it.
That's actually a very, so I have a quick follow-up question. I mean, that's a very interesting and insightful comment, in fact, that the reason we want to preserve the planet is that we live on it. I mean, from either a religious or scientific perspective, that makes a lot of sense. My own opinion, having read environmentalist writings going back to the Monkey Wrench gang from the left, is that a lot of people seem to perceive human beings as being kind of outside of nature, and to perceive real nature as being what you'd have with all the humans dead, or at least like reduced to small hunter-gatherer communities with women carrying babes on the hip while hunting deer. Do you think that's true, or is that just my paranoid kind of ranting?
That is very much how I'd characterize it personally. And yeah, I kind of generally say that we're trying to save nature for humans. They're trying to save it from humans. I do think that there is this kind of false idea, sort of a state of nature, like in an Adam Smith sense, but like a state of nature as far as progressive environmentalists would consider it, is just without us on it. As though we kind of poofed into existence someday, which is kind of ironic given that I would assume all of them agree with or evolution. Like they know that we've been here the whole time. And it is really fascinating that we really don't talk about any other species this way. Like we don't talk about how many trees would be alive if woodpeckers were all dead, or how many, whales would be alive if sharks weren't around. Like we kind of accept that there are effects of other life forms on the planet. Now, I completely recognize that the scale of human effects is definitely out of proportion with what a lot of other species are. But nevertheless, it seems like we are the only species that is not allowed to exhale carbon dioxide or leave a footprint on the ground, in the view of a lot of progressive environmentalists.
Okay, now Brooks Crenshaw, we normally go to the Christy Kelly for the first pointed question, but Brooks, you are an outdoorsman, a hunter and all that. How do you feel about the planet? Does it exist to serve man? Are we destroying the world? What do you think?
I think that we are part of nature, and I tend to agree with Allie's assessment of, the environmentalism from the left in the Malthusian, Paul Ehrlich population bomb sense of, humans are the cancer on the planet and Mother Nature would thrive if not for our evil presence, etc. And that's usually, I tend to think, couched in a disdain for others. I mean, I think there's something more deep seated than their compassion for the planet, and it's that's the mask that tends to allow them to be the compassionate stewards of the planet. As a hunter and as an outdoorsman, I think we do, Allie, kind of look at, but for the wolf, what's the population of the antelope, et cetera. I think that's actually the problem with regard to how the left views humanity, in the sense that there's too many of us, and which one should go first, right? In the no Yuval Harari sense of, that we have all these worthless people, and they're useless, and what do we do with them besides keep them busy with drugs and video games? And I think that when you look at humanity as a silo full of grain, you tend toward a pretty malevolent outcome, and the 20th century has certainly shown us that repeatedly, with Marxism and its outcomes with regard to sorting humans the way that we often do animals. So that'd be my current take on things.
Okay, so Christy Kelly, I have no idea about this. Are you an outdoors woman? I'll just open very broadly. How do you feel about the planet? What do you think about Allie's take on conservatives should be very engaged with the world? We should be out there hunting.
I mean, I guess just the phrase conservative environmentalist seems almost like an oxymoron. I mean, in general, because I think the left just goes too far, right? With most things, and in this area for sure. I definitely am an outdoors person, so I definitely, like to hike and like to be outside, much more so when I lived in California, obviously, than now in Arizona. But anyways, but Allie, I was just wondering, let's talk specifics. So, for instance, like, is global warming real? You know,
I
can
do believe
we,
it's real.
I mean, like the those are the
30
things that
seconds apiece.
I mean, that's what I would like to know is like, right now they're saying like the planet is getting hotter and we have to do all of these things to protect against global warming. And I think conservatives would say, all of that is just kind of, BS and not true. But I'd like to hear your viewpoint.
I think some conservatives would say that. I think that what I would consider to be much more reasonable conservatives would say that global warming is real. We do believe that humans are having some part of it. We probably believe that some other parts of it are natural or would be happening regardless. I think where I see the divide on this is kind of the adaptation versus mitigation, which is also not perfectly cleanly left and right, but do we have to mitigate any and all of carbon emissions and any and all of global warming, or can we adapt somewhat to this? And so you kind of have the left saying we have to mitigate absolutely all of it. We have to go completely net zero by insert date here, whatever looks really good on the climate accords pamphlet, whatever you have. And then I think that you have sort of the Alex Epstein type of like, we can innovate around this. We can just completely adapt to whatever level of it. Now, personally, I would say that I'm probably a mix of the two. I don't think that there's any reason not to mitigate emissions, not least of all because it affects the air that we breathe, and I think that matters. I know that when we've seen kind of the coal clouds coming out of China, like I don't want to breathe that. That's kind of gross, and I don't think anyone wants to live like that. I think that our sort of cultural memory of what it was like to live with really rampant pollution, especially in the US where it's been pretty cleaned up, is a little too short, and I don't think we necessarily remember how bad it can be because we've been a little bit spoiled by clean air and clean water for quite a while. At the same time, I don't necessarily think it's realistic, given the fact that the planet has always warmed and cooled to different degrees, to expect it to stay the exact same temperature that it has been roughly in the 1900s since we started, seriously measuring forever. I don't think that that's a realistic standard to hold humans to or really the planet to. I think the main project is how do we mitigate as much as we can while protecting human flourishing, protecting the energy that we need for our grid so that humans can actually thrive and prosper. And not causing undue harm to the ecosystems, because while we can adapt, that doesn't mean that every species is going to. There will be some species that probably really take off. I'm from New York State initially. The ticks are loving this. And I would say that honestly, a lot of overwintering insects in a lot of states. I was just in Alaska a couple weeks ago. The pine beetles there are loving this because they don't have to die off in the winter the same way that they used to. The pine trees are not really loving that because they have a lot more pine beetles now. So I don't think that it's as simple as the full Alex Epstein take of just we'll build higher dams. We don't have to worry about rising tide waters. But at the same time, I don't think that we should completely disregard human ingenuity. I think that we're smarter than we think. We've done this before. We've probably done this many times before than we even knew had to do with environmental issues. I mean, look at Holland. Most of that country should be under the ground or under the water at this point. So I don't know. I guess the short answer would be that I do think you can be conservative and environmentalist, and I don't think that we have to just completely disregard climate change. I think that was more a political move than an ideological one, because it was very difficult for conservatives to say, yes, climate change is real, because the left would go, yeah, and then what? We're the only ones with the solutions. We're the only ones that have been thinking about this, at least politically, at least like in mainstream in DC at the time. And so I think it was kind of a short-sighted political move to say, throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I think that we kind of gave up the reins in a way that we never should have.
Right. Just a quick follow-up to that, because when you talk about the politics of environmental issues, I think that's kind of the rub there, right? So, for instance, if you talk about energy, right, and net zero, how much of that is based around politics rather than letting the market decide and letting us naturally catch up to, working our way into solar or, wind versus going all in like California did and then having to turn around and roll it back because it didn't work, or suffering, rolling blackouts. So I think the politics of environmental issues is what makes a lot of conservatives brisk away from the subject.
100%. I think the politics and also the policy, certainly as we've kind of seen as DOGE unravels the sort of unelected bureaucratic class, I think that these, especially issues like permitting reform would go a huge way towards letting the market actually decide and helping people actually be allowed to build. The fact of the matter is that you're not allowed to build even clean energy projects these days. So you end up with this like really tangled mess of sort of bureaucratic red tape, and there's a million different approvals, and then it doesn't matter if you get the approvals because these random environmental groups can sue you out of existence regardless. But then you also have random subsidies for those exact same things. And so it's very anti-market at the end of the day. And I think that most conservative environmentalists would say, like, take your foot off the pedal, like stop trying to play invisible hand here and, just absolutely wrap up the market and all of these different policies, laws, like even just the absolute litigious process that kind of has kneecapped a lot of these clean energy projects. I think that it's pretty difficult for the market to decide right now because the government at all levels, right down to absolutely hyper-local, has its kind of hands on the steering wheel.
Yeah, and I want to give one comment as I sometimes use the term cynical right-leaning businessman. I mean, it seems like global warming is the latest one in a series of panics and plagues that are going to end the world. So like, Allie, I totally agree with you that there is some increase in global temperature, but I mean, like, we've seen just in the recent past, like the Club of Rome, the whole planet's going to run out of resources, Y2K, where we just put the nerds in a room and had them change the software, CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, like women just stopped wearing big hair. We threw away a lot of cans of that crap. I mean, but it just went on and on and on. The Western heterosexual AIDS crisis, which was coming, probably prompted more moral behavior for me and my friends in high school and college, but like it never happened. Nobody died. So, I mean, like, I tend to strongly suspect that this would be another one of these things, that in 20 years, the planet will be 2 degrees warmer, but, everyone will still be alive. And I noticed that when I read the papers in this field, because I actually am an academic, one thing that nobody ever shares in the media is that there actually are population and income and so on predictions. And at the end of most of the climate papers, like, there were still more people on Earth than there are now. they're being compared to like a hypothetical magic future as versus present reality. And so like the number of deaths and so on that's predicted is as versus utopia. Um, so I don't know if you have a comment on that. If not, I'll bounce back to the other members of the panel because we have a shorter episode. But I think anyone who's been an investor is aware of this kind of thing. Like we're on peak oil number 8 right now. So I personally don't think the world's going to end.
I don't think the
Actually,
world's going to end. I do think that I don't know, you've seen videos of like Venice flooding. I think that there are probably more human cultural sites that we're probably going to lose or have to like seriously mitigate. And I mean, Venice is Venice. You can't really move that. You can't really rebuild it elsewhere. I think genuinely, if the left were more focused on putting those images in people's minds rather than polar bears and penguins that feel very far away from home, they might actually be getting across to people. There's a reason that I use the term environmentalist more than like climate activist, and I think it's because climate change is just simply not the whole story. It's not every possible topic. It is one small, not small, but it is one part of environmentalism. And I think the left really overplayed their hand by making that the one note talking point of caring about the environment. There are a lot of people I know who care about the environment who don't believe in climate change, and they absolutely care about the environment. We disagree on that one point. They are hunters or sportsmen or fishermen or whatever, but they probably care a lot more about the crops that they're able to grow in their region of the world than they do about, melting glaciers and the fact that a certain polar bear has no dinner. But yeah, I think that the over focus on climate change as like the only part of environmentalism has really been a mistake across the board. And I do think we will be able to innovate around it, but I don't think we're necessarily entirely prepared for some of the things that we're going to lose in the process. And I'm not even saying that those are necessarily avoidable. That could have just been the outcome regardless. Like, I don't think that we necessarily know the counterfactual. Maybe Venice was always destined to become Atlantis, RIP. But I don't know.
yeah. I mean, so there, you guys can still hear me, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, great. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that there's a weird attitude in modern society. This is my one quick comment before flipping over, but I think there's a weird attitude that we can defeat death. So when I've brought up the fact that there are more people alive at the end of the climate scenarios than the beginning, people say things like, but 50,000 could die in Somalia. Surely we must change our society to prevent that. And I don't want to say that my attitude is something like, fuck them. But there is a simple reality where nature progresses on, life progresses on. We probably are going to build a great seawall around Venice, but we're not going to prevent the development of modern technology for the rest of time to save that city in Italy. It's one of the wealthier cities in Italy. They can move inland. But Brooks Crenshaw, that was a somewhat harsh take for me. You're a friendlier, kinder man. What do you think?
Well, I'm also going to take a cynical route here in that I'm old enough to have lived through three 12 years to go cycles. When I was a kid, an ice age is coming. We have 12 years. If we don't do the thing, we're all going to freeze to death. And then the ozone, and we've got 12 years and we're going to boil. And then the 12 years apparently got extended another 12 years. And so, this is where the old don't fall for three-card money because they've been exposed to it, and the young are like, "Wait, we got 12 years. Didn't you hear?" And it's like, "Nah, bitch, I've been here before. I know what's going on." So there's that aspect. The other thing is, if the planet has warmed and cooled, what will we do? We'll do the same thing when we had a big damn land bridge that made its way to North America. We'll walk on it. We'll adapt, and that's what humans do. We're an adaptable species. How much we have to do with the contributions is debatable, but I'd say let's start with China and India first. How about that? How about we do that? Because like when you look at the net totals, the UK
Not even close.
who's consistently flagellating themselves over their presence in the Atlantic, it's like if you look at their contribution, it is 0.000, and no talk of China, no talk of India. So the other thing is when the Earth warms, if it does, and it appears that could be the case, cold deaths are fewer than heat deaths. Heat deaths are the vast majority of climate-related death. So you're actually going to have a net negative death that doesn't sell newspapers and it doesn't sell memberships to Sierra Club. So these are the problems with the argument that I have. I think people like Bjorn Lomborg are really actually addressing issues in a very first principles way and looking at things like childhood nutrition to boost net total IQ, because more geniuses means more adaptability as a species. So like those are the kinds of thoughts. It always puzzles me that we have 12 years to go and the only answer is always authoritarian socialism.
Yeah,
100%.
that's interesting. I hadn't made that point, but yeah, the answer to every crisis is always communism, right? Like we've got the
Right.
COVID-19 is killing people. Guess we better set up vaccine distribution centers in the hood, make everyone give a certain percentage of their money, and after a while, you do become aware of that. Um, Christy and Allie, I actually have a question for both of you. Ellie, you mentioned regulation is a major issue in terms of getting anything done, building housing, so on. I mean, Christy, you're a power broker in one of our states. How much of an issue is that in practice if you're trying to be a YIMBY, quote unquote, and get a new build done that's going to be environmentally friendly? Is that any easier where you are than it is in Kentucky or in Illinois?
No, well, Arizona, we have the whole water issue. So right now, that's a really hot topic. I mean, we have
No pun
lawsuits
intended.
and we have lawsuits because right now the builders are having problems being able to build houses because there's not enough of water because of the water issue. So regulations is going to be a huge thing, especially here in Arizona.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, I think regulation is a big issue nationally. I mean, obviously one of the issues in the West Coast states is that they're giant cities built in deserts. And I mean, if we're talking about actual apocalypse planning, I mean, I don't think Brooks or I would live in one of them because at some point the people in those cities are going to eat each other when we go to war with China and the national grid is burnt out of the sky. Like it's a wrap if you're in Las
Trust
Vegas.
me, I hear it all the time from my husband. Trust me. He's like, this is not the place to be because you can't grow anything here. So you can't even grow your own food. So
You
yeah,
live in
if
a desert, Christy Kelly. You live in a desert.
I know, and it's all my
Quote the great
fault.
Sam
If
Kinison.
it is all, but I did have a question. So, Allie, do you try to reach conservatives? Like, do you actually try to educate them on why these issues matter? Not that it's your job. I mean, just because you're in, you don't have to have that, apostolic thing that you're going out trying to teach them. But I'm just wondering, is that part of your mission is to reach conservatives and tell them why they should care about these topics and how you can talk to them differently so they don't just shut their ears?
Yeah, I mean, I would consider myself an environmentalist in general, but it also is my job. I work for both American Conservation Coalition full-time and I write for Conserve America kind of part-time. And in both cases, I do try to articulate to conservatives like why this matters. And I really try, I help run the ACC Twitter actually, and I would argue that it looks pretty different than most left-leaning Twitters because it's not, the call to action is not SOS, there's 12 years left, everyone is going to die, and you shouldn't have babies because the climate crisis is coming kind of thing. The attitude is much more, you love this place. Isn't America awesome? Don't you care about it? Like, that's badass. And ACC, so we're a younger organization. We operate primarily through campus branches. We are 75,000 strong. Like, it's a pretty big group of young people, and they, it's campus chapters, so everybody's beliefs are across the board, but it's liberty-minded and it's conservative young people. So it really is that base group. And when we go out there, we're trying to talk to them, and especially with young people, say the whole climate anxiety thing, the whole doomerism thing, throw it out the window. Like, it's calm down. Everything's going to be okay. And I think that that's the message for young people. I generally think for conservatives, it's look, the hyper one-note focus on climate change is not what we're about. We are about loving your home. We're about being proud of it, not just absolutely hating yourself and feeling sorry for every breath that you exhale kind of thing. But and honestly caring about energy abundance. I know Brooks mentioned kind of childhood nutrition, but I think having like the country just be all systems are go on as much energy as we can produce, that is probably the number one predictor of the human flourishing that we're going to be able to see in the future of America or regular or honestly any other country. I mean, those are the people not dying because their respirators are working in the hospital, whether they're a NICU baby or an older person. I mean, that's genuinely the fact that we're able to do this is due to good energy abundance, and that sort of infrastructure. And I think reaching conservatives with the things that actually matter to them. I'm not saying I don't care about polar bears. I am saying that I've never seen one in person, not in a zoo. I care about what's in my backyard. I care about farming. I care about good agriculture. And I care about water efficiency for agriculture, not just because it's good for the planet, but because it means that my corn is cheaper. Or if I live in Arizona, it's because the corn will be made at all. Like I think you reach conservatives with much more practical items. I think conservatives are pretty inherently practical people, and they want to see how does this actually benefit me, my family, my future, and like what do I get out of this? Which I don't think is selfish. I think a lot of leftists will often kind of characterize that as a selfish thing. I think it's very natural, and I think it tends to be very pro-human. But I think that sort of messaging resonates with conservatives much better than you should care about this because if you don't, you're a bad person, which I think really only reaches people until they're about 21 years old. You don't even really need a fully formed prefrontal cortex to grasp that. But I don't know. I think that's honestly why a lot of the leftist crowds are moving on to different pastures. I mean, whether it's now it's climate justice runs through a free Palestine. Like we are just getting overly contorted on this sort of thing. But I don't know. I think that just the sort of practical messaging does resonate with conservatives. They don't necessarily want to hear about climate change, but if you're talking about energy, they are absolutely listening. And whether you call that environmental policy or not, like I don't care. It's human policy, and it's the world that we live in. So we can use whatever terms conservatives want to use. We're all talking about the same thing, and we want a better planet.
Great. Now, entirely through a fault of mine, we've got about 6 minutes left in this meeting. So, a couple different. No, I'll actually just skip what I was going to say. In 30 seconds, Allie, how do you feel about nuclear power?
Love it. I wore this t-shirt for a reason and not because I got my other one sweaty today walking around doing men on the street. I think nuclear power is the safest form of power America has. It is the cleanest form of power America has. And the too cheap to meter thing might not necessarily be true, but we need a million times more of it.
Boom. And I will say the reason we didn't develop nuke decades ago is that the communists, the godless communists, the Russians funded the anti-nuke movement. This is a legitimate fact. You should look it up. Okay, now everybody is gonna take it to the end with, let's do, where's the world gonna be in 25 years? Brooks Crenshaw, where's the world gonna be in 25 years?
If we're talking about the climate, it will be right here. There are other developments, whether we're talking about artificial superintelligence or nuclear proliferation. Those are still up in the air a little bit. I'm going to kind of hedge on those issues. With regard to the climate, it will be here. With regard to the fact that, as Christy opened with, when you think about conservative environmentalists, it's an oxymoron. We're called conservationists typically, but that's they almost rhyme. They're patterned together. So yeah, I think we're still here. I think there are maybe fewer cold deaths, which is a good thing. I think we need energy abundance, to echo Allie's point, because it kills fewer poor people when energy is cheap.
Boom. Christy Kelly, wither the planet. In 20 years, will the world be a better place, a worse place? Will we all be servants to robots? What about the environment?
It's going to be much better. I think we're leaving out of the whole insanity of like the social credit score and let's do environmental stuff because it's going to, get us a better rating or because we'll, get this, better job or better clients. And I think if we just let the market dictate naturally and evolve naturally and close coal plants naturally and move to nuclear rather than just forcing things, I think that's going to be better. And also the sweet spot is the younger generation. So I love, the Turning Point crowd and, the crowd that Allie is, appealing to with the high schools. They're going to be much smarter about all this than we were.
Yeah, I will say, as long as they don't become too jaded and decadent, if you look at some of the internal turning point fights and so on, like a bad Israel, what like anyway. But Allie Voss, you are going to, and congratulations on the marriage, by the way. You are going to take us to the end here. Where will the world be in 20 years, and how will your generation of people change it? Are we all going to die?
We're not all going to die. Well, I don't know about some of the older people. I mean, as you mentioned, there might be deaths. We're not all going to die. I do think that ideally the market will be leading, and I think that that will probably be closing coal plants naturally the way that it always has. Natural gas, for example, is the unsung hero of emission reduction. That's what most of the U.S. emission reductions have come from, switching from coal to natural gas, not any other clean energy source, really. I think that we're going to see some really radical innovation. We're already seeing things like cloud seeding and kind of these crazy wacko technologies that would have seemed sci-fi 10, 20 years ago. I don't necessarily know that every single one of them is going to be perfect, but I absolutely do know that some of them are going to come through and make probably our kids' and grandkids' lives a lot more cool, and hopefully filled with more food and more energy than our grandparents.
Boom, beautiful. We have 50 seconds left, so I guess I'll use them. My own impression is pretty much on par with what Allie said. I think that a lot of debates that we have today, from kind of race and region with IQ to, is there time in life to have a child for business women? A lot of those things are going to be totally obviated by technology. I mean, I would expect people are going to have tutorial implants in their brain that'll work with the computer that's wired to their wrist. I see Christy and Allie just wincing, but this is going to happen.
To say, Patriot J, I'm saving the day. Patriot J, I'm saving the day from you commies who lame. No, you can't fuck with me. I got a country to say. God bless the US of A. Land of the free and a home of the brave. God get all of the praise. I got a country to say, cause I'm Patriot J and I'm saving the day.